The unthinkable has just happened. The dying Dr. Octavius has used a special device to transfer his mind into the body of Peter Parker, also known as the Amazing Spider-Man. Now with the young body of Spider-Man, and with Octavius's body and Peter's mind successfully imprisoned away at the raft, Octavius, now possessing all of Peter's memories, has invited Mary Jane over to his apartment. Using Peter's memories, he's able to establish the perfect date for her, getting her favorite food, movie, and wine. And now Octavius will have something that Peter hasn't had for a very long time. Mary Jane seems open to all of this, but when she is about to have some fun with Peter, she is surprised to find the Spider-Man outfit under Peter's regular clothing. It kills the mood pretty quickly, but Otto makes the situation worse with his temper and attitude, and Mary Jane quickly recognizes something is odd. Before they can follow up on this, Otto is then distracted by news that Peter has somehow managed to escape from the raft. He's impressed, considering his old body was dying, that Peter managed to engineer this escape, and Mary Jane understands that he has to go and deal with this. Peter agrees and rushes off to John F. Kennedy Airport in order to purchase a round-trip flight to Belgium, basically going there and immediately returning back, with just enough time to be in the air for the next 15 hours. Otto knows this is exactly enough time to let Peter die in Otto's old body. Meanwhile, the escaped Peter Parker, now in the body of Otto Octavius, has managed to recruit a number of supervillains to help him engineer what they think is a revenge attempt against Spider-Man, but really is an attempt for Peter to set things right. Over at the raft, Mayor J. Jonah Jameson announces that Otto Octavius is doomed to be caught sooner or later, pointing out that the supervillain has nothing but a career of failure and humiliation behind him. Watching this on the news at the airport, Octavius opts to not leave the country for now, and confront his longtime nemesis once and for all. Otto gathers all of Peter's friends and family in a safe hideout and confronts Peter Parker about all of this. Peter, in Otto's body, is having trouble keeping up with Otto, who knows all of his tricks and resources that he once had as Dr. Octopus. Peter also struggles to keep his villain lackeys from killing various cops, guards, and other people that get in his way, as he begins traveling through New York City to steal technology that'll enable him to fight against Spider-Man. At the hideout, Mary Jane asks Peter to talk for a moment, and even though he's busy, she manages to convince him to listen. When she tries to offer Peter some consolation, Otto coldly replies that's all Mary Jane seems to do lately, based on what he's seen out of Peter's memories. She's just the plucky best friend with that one motivational speech, and he questions what the point of it all is, asking her why she's still hanging around. Confronted like this, Mary Jane admits that she loves Peter, and she knows it all the way down at the bottom of her soul, in spite of everything that's happened between them. Responding to this, Otto kisses her, and the two seem on a path towards reconciliation. Spider-Man confronts Peter in the Avengers Tower, able to punch the Scorpion's jaw clean off. Otto realizes just how strong Spider-Man truly is, and deduces that all this time that he's been fighting Peter, the man has been holding back. Peter is then able to use the Dr. Octopus arms to grab Spider-Man, and say that he's not going to let him hurt anybody else. When Otto threatens some of Peter's colleagues, including Mary Jane, by attacking them with impact webbing, a type of webbing that Peter only generally reserves for super-powered individuals, Peter realizes that Otto is too dangerous to simply let live. And even if it means destroying his own original body, and the current one he's in, he grabs Spider-Man and launches them both out of a window. Thinking fast, and smarter than Peter ever managed to, Spider-Man is able to use his webbing to create a giant airbag at the ground, saving his own life. The fall breaks Dr. Octavius' old body, but Peter is able to still live on by using the golden drone that had originally switched their minds to begin with. The drone knows that it just crossed a line and tried to kill Octavius, even if it was a desperate last resort. One way or another, he can never be Spider-Man again, but at the very least, he can prevent Otto from ever hurting anybody else. When he attempts to switch their minds back, Otto reveals that he's wearing chromium plating around his head. In other words, victory is his. In front of a crowd who watches on, including Mary Jane, who has left the Avengers Tower, Otto prepares to finish off Peter Parker once and for all. However, Peter realizes the connection between their minds is still present thanks to the golden drone. It might not have been able to successfully switch their minds back, but that connection's still there, while Otto's body is finally giving out. Peter realizes his life is flashing before his eyes, and he decides to give Otto a front row seat. Otto, who had Peter Parker's memories, is now forced to live through them. And the emotional weight of everything that Spider-Man has ever been through, every victory, every loss, every little bit of struggle, runs through Otto's mind. Otto is overwhelmed by these memories and cannot believe that Peter Parker apparently has no regrets. But Peter insists it's all true. Even saving Otto was worth it, and he'd do it all again, because that's who he is. And now, it's who they are. A now changed Otto Octavius admits he doesn't want this, and it's all too much. And when Otto asks how he's supposed to do all of this, Peter only replies that he will do it because he has to. Because with great power comes great responsibility. Otto says he understands, and Peter says he better. He's Spider-Man now. And Otto turns Peter's head so he can look on at his friends and family as he passes away. Farewell, Peter Parker. Know this, I will carry on your name. You may be leaving this world, but you are not leaving it to a villain. I swear, I will be Spider-Man. Better yet, with my unparalleled genius and my boundless ambition, I'll be a better Spider-Man than you ever were. From this day forth, I shall become the superior Spider-Man. Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is my recap and review of The Amazing Spider-Man number 700. So, as I've hinted at in my last random review of Mary Jane Comics, this final issue of our reviews is a big one. We are talking about a game-changing Spider-Man comic, one that made headlines outside of comic book media and was deeply influential in the stories that were told in the years following its publication, which at this point happened several years ago. Last review, I had a lot of criticisms to make of Dan Slott, and those criticisms are all still valid, just not necessarily for this issue, or in my opinion, Superior Spider-Man at large. More than anything else, it actually reminds me of one of Dan Slott's final issues with The Amazing Spider-Man, another big 100-issue anniversary, namely ASM number 800. It was extra large, about double or maybe even arguably triple the size of a normal length comic book, and really told a sincere, emotionally deep story. ASM number 700 is pretty much identical to that. A longer story entirely from the point of view of Peter and Otto already having switched bodies, and dealing with them dancing around each other, using their minds to combat one another in a very unusual circumstance, before the overall premise and setup of Superior Spider-Man is introduced to us as readers at the end of this issue. I love it. Even rereading this comic for this review, I was choking up a bit at the end. It's a really moving story that sets up a new chapter in Spider-Man history unlike anything that had ever come before it. That's one thing worth commenting on here. It shouldn't be forgotten as we get past the initial release of Superior Spider-Man and as it becomes an older story and part of Spider-Man history. This was a game-changing storyline. Certainly villains taking over the bodies of heroes and doing other weird mind switcheroo things is nothing new in the world of comics, but nothing had ever been set up with such longevity in mind. And the time that Otto spent as Spider-Man was truly transformative for the character. Hubert Ramos is once again responsible for the artwork of this particular issue, and he does a phenomenal job. This might be some of his best work as a Spider-Man artist throughout his time working with Dan Slott and other writers. He just nails the overall dynamic required for this particular story and really gives a strong sense of feeling to those final moments of Peter Parker's life before Otto takes over as Spider-Man and transforms into something else. This comic's also great for giving us a sense of what Otto would have been like as Spider-Man had he not been forced to live through Peter's life and thus become a weird hybrid of both Otto Octavius and Peter Parker. This is a truly wonderful emotional experience, and exactly what I said was missing from too much of Dan Slott's writing in Spider-Man in other comics. Like Amazing Spider-Man number 800, I love issue number 700 and would consider it pretty much essential in the history and story of Spider-Man, given what it does with Otto's character and how important it is for understanding Otto's character going forward as a pseudo-villain to Spider-Man, but one who would never quite be the same. Yes, Otto now knows all of Peter Parker's dirty little secrets and super important details of his life on a level that no other villain knows of any other superhero. But he's also been changed by these memories and will never again be the same antagonistic person that he once was. Because as much as he's been influenced by Peter's memories, he's also been heavily influenced by Peter's heroism. And that's changed the character in a number of important ways. It hasn't completely erased Otto Octavius or the attitude behind this character that Dan Slott would come to perfect during his run with Superior Spider-Man. Nor am I saying Dan Slott's time with Superior Spider-Man is perfect. What it did to Black Cat's character alone makes it so that statement could never possibly be true. But it's a bold, interesting change for the character, and one that, by the way, got Dan Slott death threats and other ridiculous behavior, even though it was so obvious that this was just a temporary thing and Otto wasn't permanently taking over Peter Parker's body. That behavior I still have trouble wrapping my head around. Not so much the idea of death threats against a public figure, but supposed Spider-Man fans resorting to death threats because a writer did something that they didn't like. That's crazy to me. Superior Spider-Man could have been the worst thing in the world and Dan Slott wouldn't have deserved that. But it really just is an interesting phenomenon of behavior. As you all know, if you're making death threats against a writer because he said something you didn't like, by definition you can't be a Spider-Man fan because you don't understand what Spider-Man's all about. That particular level of irony is what makes this whole story a little bit more interesting, if you ask me, and the public reaction to Superior Spider-Man is as important to understanding that story as it is understanding the story itself. It's remarkable how easily fans were challenged and how poorly some of them reacted to this overall story. But I liked it. I thought it was very brave and ballsy and one of the strongest things Dan Slott ever did during his time with Spider-Man. This issue handles that all perfectly, setting everything up nicely, and yes, there are other issues with Superior Spider-Man beyond Black Cat's character, such as the fact that the only real consequences Peter Parker ever really experienced out of all this were only ever introduced by Nick Spencer years after the fact. But in spite of its problems and relative weaknesses, I love Superior Spider-Man, and here, at ASM number 700, it all truly began. And for that reason, I love this comic. And thus we conclude the Mary Jane reviews with a really big issue. I have to say, it's an unfortunate aspect of her character that because we're going randomly, it means that a lot of her appearances in these comics weren't huge issues for her, and she didn't always have something to do. But here at the end, and really in these final issues, we really got to see Mary Jane coalesce into this proper supporting character that always seems to have some sort of important role in all of this. It's important to remember that, even though they're broken up at this point and there's this weird cold tension between Peter Parker and Mary Jane, she's still a huge part of this story and was there basically on the ground level when this major event in Peter Parker's life happened that would change him and Dr. Octopus forever. Of course, Mary Jane wouldn't know about a lot of this until years later, but she was able to correctly identify certain aspects of Otto's behavior being a huge violation of what she'd expect out of Peter Parker. An interesting note on her character that she's one of the few who easily saw through Otto's behavior and never quite bought it. Basically, just giving up on him and realizing that the Peter Parker under control of Otto Octavius is not the same man that she once married. An interesting statement on her character that I really like. But I really do enjoy the overall look and feel of Mary Jane's character that we got out of these 10 random issues featuring her. Right from the beginning, in the Stan Lee comic that we reviewed, Mary Jane had a lot of character to her. Character traits that made her distinct and interesting, and one that stood out from all the other supporting characters in Peter Parker's life, all the way back from the 1960s, straight up until here in the relative present day. Her character is one that has become an essential part of Peter Parker's life. I've often said that she's not a necessary part of Spider-Man, mostly in the context of reviewing all these Marvel comics that insisted on her not being a major part of Spider-Man's life. But going through these issues now more than ever, I'm starting to think that's not necessarily true, and Marvel was, from the very beginning of One More Day, wrong to set her character back between the Nick Spencer comics of current day and looking over these older comics featuring Mary Jane. I believe that now more than ever. So thank you so much for watching this little mini-series we've done. Random reviews is something that I quite enjoy doing, and it is something that will return at some point in April, featuring a very different character from Mary Jane over on the DC side of things, and a random series of comics that are going to be a very different tone and of a very different nature compared to what we were reviewing here for Mary Jane. So stay tuned for that and a bunch of other videos I have planned. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.